The lonely billionaire faced an empty wedding until his secretary appeared in a way no one imagined. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive right into today's story. Picture this: a beautiful, high-end ballroom, sparkling with chandeliers and intricate decor. Yet, there's an unsettling silence in the air. The guests have all been invited. The dresses, the tuxedos, the extravagant food, all of it set up in anticipation. But there's a problem. The groom is standing alone. He's standing there, at the altar, in front of rows of empty seats. His tuxedo is immaculate, but his heart is anything but. The lonely billionaire, Evan Hall. A man whose wealth could fill cities, whose name was known in every boardroom across the globe, now faces an empty wedding. No bride, no guests, just the echo of silence. Evan takes a deep breath, trying to steady himself, his hands trembling slightly as he grips the edges of the podium. The wedding planner steps toward him, offering a reassuring smile, though her eyes betray the pity she's trying to hide. "Mr. Hall," she begins, "is there anything I can do?" Evan just shakes his head. "No, it's fine," he replies, though his voice cracks. He couldn't deny it any longer. This wedding, this entire charade, was nothing but a hollow attempt to appease his family's expectations. His heart wasn't in it, and now, here he was, alone. No one to share the moment with, no one to witness the vows. This wedding wasn't for love, it was for business. He was only doing it to keep the family business in good standing, and to honor a promise made long ago. But none of that mattered now. His family wasn't here. The woman he was supposed to marry, she never showed. And he couldn't help but wonder, as he stood there under the bright lights, if it was all worth it. The groom stood there, staring out into the empty seats. The air felt suffocating, the silence deafening. He let out a long sigh, his shoulders slumping under the weight of it all. Just as he was about to turn away, the doors to the ballroom opened with a soft creak. He spun around, thinking maybe someone had arrived. But no one came through the doors. Just a figure. His secretary, Lauren. She walked in, her steps steady and purposeful, her expression calm despite the situation. She had no business being here, not in this wedding, not in this lavish place. But she was here, and she was looking at him, eyes full of concern. "Evan," she said quietly, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do." Lauren had been with Evan for years, more of a rock than an employee. She was the one who handled everything, from his daily schedule to his most private matters. And yet here she was, standing in the middle of the room, offering nothing more than her presence. "What are you doing here?" Evan asked, his voice hoarse, betraying the emotions he hadn't let himself feel until now. Lauren stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "I couldn't let you go through this alone. Not like this. You deserve more." Evan felt his throat tighten. He had never imagined Lauren, his loyal secretary, the woman who kept everything running smoothly, would be the one to show up and be the one to finally remind him that there was more to life than business and obligation. This moment, as strange and unexpected as it was, felt like a lifeline. Lauren wasn't just a secretary. She wasn't just a background figure in his life. She was the person who had always been there, even when he hadn't realized how much he needed her. For the first time in a long while, Evan allowed himself to feel something other than duty and obligation. "Lauren, But before he could finish his sentence, she walked over to him, standing beside him at the altar, her presence a quiet but undeniable force. The moment was so raw, so real. It was almost as if the universe had planned it this way all along. And just then, he realized, maybe this was the sign he needed. Maybe it was time for him to stop pretending, to stop living a life driven by expectations and appearances, to finally live for himself, for his own happiness. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew that with Lauren by his side, he didn't have to face the empty seats alone. As Evan stood there at the altar, staring at Lauren, the reality of the situation began to settle in. His once perfect world of wealth, power, and business deals suddenly felt insignificant. All his life, He had been driven by the expectations of his family, society, and his own ambition. But now, in this empty ballroom, surrounded by silence, he felt lost. He turned to Lauren, the one person who had always been there for him, and realized something he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge before he needed her more than he ever thought. She wasn't just his secretary, his assistant, or his employee. She was the person who had stayed by his side through everything. She had seen him at his best, but also at his worst, and still, she never left. Lauren had quietly managed every detail of his life, from his hectic work schedule to his personal matters, without ever asking for anything in return. Yet, here she was, offering him something far more valuable than any business deal or luxury her presence. The room seemed to close in around him as he looked at her. Lauren was more than just a calm, professional figure in his office. She was real. She was here. And for the first time, Evan could see that what he had been searching for wasn't some contract, some idealized version of a perfect life. It was connection, with her. For a moment, Evan felt embarrassed. He had spent so much time chasing after wealth, status, and recognition, and for what? None of that could fill the emptiness that had settled in his chest. But Lauren had always been different. Her sincerity, her kindness, her quiet strength, it was all so clear now. Evan cleared his throat, trying to compose himself. Lauren, his words faltered as she reached out and gently placed a hand on his arm. You don't have to say anything, she said softly. You've been through enough. Let's just get out of here, okay? This isn't what you really want. The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, yet so comforting, hit him harder than he expected. She was right. This wedding, this charade of a life he had built, was not what he truly wanted. Evan had spent so many years building walls around himself, believing that if he achieved enough, he would finally feel fulfilled. But the truth was, he was suffocating in his own success. His loneliness, his unspoken fears, they were all there, hiding behind the facade of a perfect life. Lauren, in her quiet way, had helped him see it. She had made him realize that what he truly needed was not the approval of others, but to finally stop running from his own heart. For the first time in his life, Evan allowed himself to feel vulnerable. I don't even know what to do anymore, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought this wedding would fix everything. I thought if I just went through with it, things would be better. Lauren gave him a small, reassuring smile. You don't have to fix everything, Evan. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is just stop pretending. You've been trying to live up to everyone's expectations for so long. But what about your own? What do you want? Her words hit him like a wave. What did he want? For so long, he had been living a life dictated by others, by society's standards of success. But now, standing there with Lauren, he realized that the only person whose approval he needed was his own. He didn't want a life built on obligations, on appearances. He wanted a life of meaning, of authenticity. And, for the first time, he wanted it with Lauren. As the minutes ticked by, the silence between them grew more comfortable. Evan could hear the distant hum of music from the reception, but it felt like a world away. It didn't matter anymore. The only thing that mattered now was the person standing beside him. And suddenly, the weight that had been pressing down on him for years started to lift. Evan didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Lauren, he said, his voice steadier now. I think I've been wrong about a lot of things. She looked up at him, her expression soft but knowing. I think I've been wrong too, she replied. The truth was, neither of them had ever imagined this moment. Evan had never expected to find himself standing here, in the middle of an empty wedding, with his secretary offering him a way out. And Lauren? She had never imagined that the man she had worked so closely with, the man who had always seemed so untouchable, would ever need her like this. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the possibility of a future where they could both be free of the burdens they had carried for so long. As they stood there together, Evan made a decision. He wasn't going to let this moment slip away. He wasn't going to go back to his old life of expectations and pretending. He would face the future, whatever it held, with Lauren by his side. And for the first time, he felt like he could breathe. Maybe, just maybe, they both had a chance at something real. As the days passed, Evan and Lauren began to navigate a new reality. one where their lives were no longer defined by expectations or the burdens of a marriage that was never meant to be. The days after the wedding were a blur, a mix of uncertainty, but also newfound freedom. They had both stepped away from the conventional paths they had been following, and in doing so, they were beginning to discover a different side of each other, one that was more genuine, more vulnerable, and more real than the roles they had played before. Evan's once lavish lifestyle now felt empty without the facade of the business empire he had built. He had always focused on the external, his wealth, his status, his family's legacy, but now, for the first time, he was forced to focus on what was truly important to him, his own happiness. Lauren, too, was beginning to realize that the life she had always known, one of servitude, of doing everything for others, needed to change. She had been the one to help Evan navigate the chaos of his life, but now, as she spent more time with him, she saw the cracks in his armor and the humanity behind the cold, calculated exterior. It was a side of him she had never fully understood until now, and it made her wonder if perhaps she had been too focused on her own role in his life to notice the person he truly was. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Evan called Lauren into his office, his voice unusually soft, almost hesitant. She stepped into the office, where the view of the city skyline seemed dimmed by the heavy rain. Evan was sitting at his desk, papers scattered before him, but his eyes were distant. Lauren hesitated for a moment before walking toward him. "Evan, is everything all right?" she asked. He looked up, meeting her gaze, his expression conflicted. "I don't know, Lauren," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I thought I had it all figured out. I thought if I just kept going, kept working, kept building, that it would all make sense. But it doesn't. It feels like I'm drowning in this life I've created. I don't know who I am anymore." Lauren's heart tightened as she watched him. It was the first time she had seen him so vulnerable, so lost. She had always seen him as the strong, confident businessman, the man who seemed to have everything under control. But now, the mask was gone, and she saw the raw, unguarded man behind it all. "You don't have to do this alone," she said gently. She could feel the weight of his pain, the same weight she had been carrying in her own life. She had always been the one to keep things together, to solve problems. But now, in this moment, she realized that she, too, needed someone to help her. Evan looked at her, his eyes searching hers, as though trying to figure out what to say. He had always been a man of few words, especially when it came to his emotions, but there was something about the way Lauren was looking at him that made him want to open up. "Lauren, he started, but the words caught in his throat. He took a deep breath and continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never expected this. I never expected you to be the one to make me realize how much I've been missing. I've spent my whole life running from everything, my emotions, my family, my real self. But now, with you, I feel like maybe I'm finally seeing things clearly." Lauren felt a surge of emotion rise within her, but she didn't speak. She simply walked over to him, standing beside his desk, her presence steady and comforting. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that allowed both of them to reflect on the moment, to absorb what had been said and what was left unsaid. After a long pause, Lauren finally spoke, her voice soft yet firm. "Evan, you don't have to carry all of this by yourself anymore. You don't have to keep pretending to be someone you're not. I've seen the man you are beneath all the pressure, the business, the expectations, and I want you to know that it's enough. You are enough." Evan looked at her, a mix of gratitude and disbelief in his eyes. No one had ever spoken to him like this, not even his family. For the first time, he felt like someone truly saw him for who he was, not for what he had. He opened his mouth to speak, but words failed him. Instead, he stood up and walked around the desk, standing directly in front of her. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, but Lauren didn't pull away. She met his touch with her own, and in that moment, something shifted. There was no need for words, no grand declarations, just the simple understanding that they had both been holding on to so much for so long, and it was time to let go, time to move forward. The rain outside began to slow, the sky clearing just enough to let the light filter through. Evan and Lauren stood there, facing each other, no longer bound by the roles they had played in each other's lives, but by the truth they had found together. As the days passed, their bond deepened. Evan slowly started letting go of the life he had built, the one that had suffocated him for so long. He began to rediscover who he was, not as a billionaire, but as a person. And Lauren, for the first time, allowed herself to embrace her own worth, her own desires, her own life. They didn't have all the answers, but they didn't need to. Together, they would figure it out. And that, for both of them, was enough. As the weeks went by, Evan and Lauren settled into a new rhythm. The weight that had once suffocated them, both individually and together, began to lift. For the first time in years, Evan felt like he was truly living, not just existing for the sake of appearances or obligations. He was discovering that there was more to life than meetings, deadlines, and the constant chase for success. He started focusing on the things that truly mattered: his peace of mind, his personal growth, and, most importantly, his relationship with Lauren. Lauren, too, was beginning to change. For years, she had been the one behind the scenes, managing every aspect of Evan's life without ever considering her own needs. She had always been the professional, the reliable secretary who never showed weakness. But now, with Evan's support, she was learning to embrace her own desires and dreams, letting go of the role she had always played. It was one afternoon, a few months after the wedding fiasco, when Evan called Lauren into his office with a surprising request. He had been away on a business trip for the past few days, but when he returned, he seemed more contemplative than usual. "Lauren," he said, as she walked into his office, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about stopping the pretending and being true to ourselves. I think you're right." Lauren raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this conversation was heading. "What do you mean?" she asked, standing across from his desk. Evan sat back in his chair, his fingers tapping on the edge of the wooden surface. "I've been living in this bubble for so long, focused on the wrong things. I've ignored what really matters. And honestly, I've been afraid to look at it. But I can't live like that anymore. I need to make some changes, not just in my business, but in my life, in everything." Lauren watched him carefully, sensing the weight of his words. "What kind of changes?" she asked, her voice soft. Evan leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I want to start fresh. I want to do things differently. And I think it's time for both of us to step out of the roles we've been playing. I've been holding on to this image of who I thought I needed to be, but it's not who I am anymore." There was a long pause before Lauren spoke, her heart pounding in her chest. "And what does that mean for us?" she asked quietly. Evan stood up from his desk and walked over to her, his expression a mixture of uncertainty and resolve. "It means," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion, "that I want us to stop pretending. I don't want to live my life for anyone else anymore. Not for my family, not for my business partners, and definitely not for the image I've created. I want to live for me. And, if you're willing, I want to live for us." Lauren felt a rush of emotions: surprise, relief, and something else, something deeper. She had never imagined that Evan, the man who had always been so detached and focused on his empire, would finally recognize the truth they both had been running from: their connection, their feelings for each other. "Are you saying that you want more than just this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Evan nodded, his eyes locking onto hers. "Yes, I do. I've been running from it for so long, but I can't anymore. I want to see where this can go, where we can go, together." Lauren's heart raced as she took a step closer to him, her mind processing everything he had just said. She had always known there was something more between them, something real, but she had never dared to believe it could become something lasting. But now, as Evan stood before her, his vulnerability laid bare, she felt something shift inside of her. For the first time, she wasn't just the secretary, the assistant. She was a partner, someone who had a place in his life beyond the professional. "I think," Lauren whispered, her voice steady now, "I think I've wanted that too. For a long time." Evan smiled, his relief evident in his eyes. "Then let's do it. Let's start over. No more pretending." The two of them stood there, in the quiet of Evan's office, a world of possibilities opening up before them. It was as if a weight had been lifted from both of their shoulders, the burden of expectations and pretense finally gone. From that moment on, everything changed. They began to build a life together, one that was no longer based on what the world expected, but on what they truly wanted. It wasn't going to be easy. Of course, there were still obstacles to face: challenges to overcome, but for the first time, they felt ready to face them. Together. As the days turned into weeks, Evan and Lauren found themselves spending more time outside of the office, exploring the world beyond the business world they had both known so well. They started talking more openly, sharing their hopes, their dreams, and their fears. For Evan, it was a revelation. He had spent so much of his life closed off, thinking he had to handle everything on his own. But now, with Lauren by his side, he realized that he didn't have to do it alone anymore. He could lean on her, just as she had always leaned on him. And Lauren, for the first time, felt like she had a future that wasn't tied to someone else's expectations. She could finally be herself, without worrying about what anyone else thought. They were no longer bound by the roles they had played in each other's lives. They were building something new, something real, and something that felt like home. As the months passed, Evan and Lauren's relationship continued to evolve in ways they never expected. They both had moments of doubt, moments where they questioned whether they were making the right choices. But as they worked through their fears together, they realized that they had found something rare, something real. For Evan, it was a revelation. He had spent most of his life building an empire, burying himself in business deals and boardrooms. But now, as he stood by Lauren's side, he understood that success wasn't just about wealth or status. It was about love, connection, and living a life that felt true to himself. Lauren, too, had grown. She had always been the reliable one, the one who kept everything running smoothly for others. But now, she was learning to make space for herself, to let go of the role of the dutiful assistant and step into a life where she was allowed to be more than just the supporting character in someone else's story. One chilly autumn evening, they sat together in Evan's apartment, the city lights casting a soft glow through the windows. They were having one of their late-night conversations, a ritual that had become a grounding force in their relationship. As they sipped their coffee, Evan turned to Lauren, his eyes thoughtful. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about everything about us, about how far we've come," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Lauren raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what are you thinking?" she asked. Evan hesitated for a moment before speaking again, his words coming slowly. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what it means to truly live. Not for anyone else, not for business, but for me, for us." Lauren felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was strange, but in that moment, she realized how much he had changed. The man who once seemed so distant, so caught up in his own world, was now opening up to her in a way that felt raw and genuine. "You know, I feel the same way," Lauren said, her voice soft. "For the longest time, I didn't allow myself to really think about what I wanted. I was always too focused on what everyone else needed, especially you." Evan's heart swelled at her words. He had always known that Lauren was an exceptional person, but hearing her speak like this, with so much honesty and vulnerability, made him realize just how much he had taken her for granted. "Lauren," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know what I would have done without you. You've been by my side through everything, even when I didn't deserve it. You were always the one who kept everything together, even when I was falling apart." Lauren felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to him. She had never expected him to say something like that, especially after all the time they had spent working together. It was as if he was finally seeing her, really seeing her, for the first time. "Evan," she whispered, her hand resting gently on his, "you don't have to thank me. I've always wanted to be there for you. But now, I need you to know that I'm here for me too. I need to make my own choices, just like you've started doing." Evan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. They were no longer the people they used to be, the ones who lived their lives according to the expectations of others. They were becoming their true selves, together. Over the next few weeks, they continued to grow closer. They traveled together, exploring new places, sharing experiences they had never thought possible before. They laughed more, argued less, and spent their days building a future that felt right for them. One weekend, while they were walking through a park near Evan's apartment, Lauren stopped suddenly, her eyes locking with his. "Evan, I've been thinking about something," she said, her voice serious but calm. Evan looked at her, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "I know we've been taking things slow," she began, "but I can't help but feel like we're both ready for something more." Evan's heart skipped a beat as he realized what she was saying. He had thought about this too, but he wasn't sure if Lauren felt the same way. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm ready to take the next step," she said, her eyes searching his for any sign of hesitation. "I'm ready for us to be more than just two people figuring things out. I'm ready for a real commitment." Evan's breath caught in his throat as he looked at her, his mind racing. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, the moment that would define their future. Without thinking, he took her hand in his, pulling her close. "Lauren, I feel the same way. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He paused for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a future with you, not just as your boss, not just as your friend, but as your partner, your equal." The words hung in the air between them, filled with the promise of everything they had yet to discover. Lauren smiled, her heart full. "Then let's do it," she said softly, "together." In that moment, as they stood there in the park, surrounded by the beauty of the autumn leaves and the quiet hum of the city, Evan realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Love, purpose, and a life he could share with the one person who had always been there, through it all. It wasn't going to be easy, but it would be worth it. And for the first time in a long time, Evan knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the weeks passed, Evan and Lauren settled into a new, deeper rhythm of life together. Their bond growing stronger with each passing day. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of uncertainty, moments when they questioned if they were truly ready for the kind of commitment they were building. But they knew one thing for sure: they were no longer alone. They had each other. For Evan, the realization was profound. The empire he had built, the career that had consumed his every waking hour, now seemed secondary to the life he was creating with Lauren. The weight of his past decisions, driven by obligation, status, and family legacy, began to feel lighter as he stepped into a future that was entirely his own. He was learning, slowly but surely, that real fulfillment didn't come from accolades or financial success, but from love, from being present in moments, and from having someone to share those moments with. Lauren, too, was embracing the changes. She had spent so many years living in the background, always behind the scenes, always playing a supporting role. But now, she was stepping into the light, owning her worth, and learning how to make decisions that were right for her, not just for others. She realized that the role she had always played, being the steady, dependable one, was just a small piece of who she truly was. She was more than that. She was worthy of her own dreams, her own desires. And she realized she wanted to build those dreams alongside Evan. One evening, after a long day spent out with friends, Evan and Lauren found themselves walking through the city, the cool air crisp against their skin. The city was alive with energy, yet there was a quiet intimacy between them, a silence that spoke volumes. They didn't need to fill the space with words. Their connection was enough. As they walked, Evan turned to Lauren, his face serious. "I've been thinking about something," he said, his voice steady. "About us." Lauren looked up at him, her heart beating a little faster. "What about us?" she asked, a hint of curiosity in her voice. Evan stopped walking, gently pulling her to a quiet corner of the street, away from the noise. "I know we've been taking things slowly, and I know we've both had our doubts, but Lauren, I'm ready. I'm ready for the next step." Lauren's breath caught in her chest. She had felt the same shift, the same pull toward a future they hadn't quite defined yet. But hearing him say it out loud made everything feel more real. "What do you mean, Evan?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Evan smiled softly, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "I want us to move in together. I want to share everything with you. No more separate lives, no more pretending. I want to build something real, something lasting. With you, Lauren." Lauren felt her heart swell in her chest, the excitement mixing with a sense of relief. She had wanted this too, but hearing him voice, it made everything fall into place. She had always admired his strength, his ability to take charge in the business world, but now she saw a different side of him, vulnerable, honest, and ready to take on the world with her by his side. "I've been thinking the same thing," she said, her voice firm with determination. "I want that too, Evan. I want to build a future with you. Not just as a couple, but as equals. I want to be partners in every sense of the word." Evan's heart raced as he looked at her, realizing how far they had come from the awkward beginning of their journey. It hadn't been an easy road, but they had made it through, together. "Then let's do it," he said, his voice full of confidence. "Let's take the next step, together." That night, as they lay in bed, Evan turned to Lauren, his mind buzzing with excitement and possibility. "I never thought I'd get here, you know," he said quietly. "I spent so much of my life focused on work, on what I was supposed to achieve. But now, I know. I know that the most important thing I can achieve is this life, with you." Lauren smiled, her heart full as she curled up next to him. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. "I'm glad we're here." Over the next few months, Evan and Lauren began to make plans for their future together. They found a new apartment, one that was big enough to accommodate both of their lives, their careers, and their shared dreams. They spent weekends shopping for furniture, planning their next vacation, and simply enjoying each other's company. For the first time in his life, Evan felt at peace. His career was still important, but it no longer defined him. He had found something greater than success. He had found love, he had found a partner, and he had found himself. As they moved in together, everything seemed to fall into place. They settled into their new home, a place that felt like a fresh start, a place where they could build a life they were both proud of. And as they stood there, side by side, in the quiet of their new home, Evan knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. They had built something real, something lasting, and for the first time in his life, Evan truly understood what it meant to be home. As the months went by, Evan and Lauren's life together continued to unfold in ways neither of them could have predicted. They had settled into a routine, a sense of stability that both of them had yearned for. But now, new challenges were starting to emerge. It wasn't anything drastic, but the little things were beginning to test the strength of their bond. At first, it had felt like nothing could break them, but life had a way of testing even the strongest connections. Evan had continued to lead his company, but now, instead of the cold, detached leader he had once been, he was more hands-on, more engaged with his team. He didn't just make decisions from his office anymore. He walked the halls, spoke to his employees, and made sure that his work was no longer just about profits, it was about making a difference, about doing work that mattered. Lauren, on the other hand, was finding her own voice. She had always been the steady, reliable one behind the scenes, but now she was beginning to take on new projects, to explore her own passions and ideas. She was slowly starting to move beyond the role she had always played, and for the first time, she was pursuing something that was truly hers. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when she wondered if she was doing the right thing, but Evan was there to support her every step of the way. He had always believed in her, but now, he was watching her believe in herself. It was a beautiful thing to witness. One day, as they sat together in their cozy living room, a quiet Saturday afternoon stretching before them, Evan turned to Lauren, his eyes thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, his voice quieter than usual. Lauren looked at him, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What about?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Evan hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I think I'm ready to take the next big step, not just in work, but in our lives." Lauren's heart skipped a beat as she looked at him. She had been waiting for this moment, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Evan smiled, his expression both calm and resolute. "I think it's time we start talking about the future in a real way. I don't want to keep waiting for the right time. I want to start building a life with you that's not just about our careers or what's expected of us. I want a future that's truly ours, one where we're not just living day by day, but planning for what's to come." Lauren could feel the excitement building in her chest as she listened to him. She had always known that Evan was the kind of person who took charge, who made things happen, but now, she was seeing another side of him, the side that wanted to build a real, lasting future with her. "I've been thinking about that too," she said, her voice steady. "I want that future, Evan. I want it with you." There was a brief silence, as they both let the weight of the conversation settle in. This was the moment they had both been waiting for, the moment when everything shifted from the present to the future. Evan reached for her hand, his fingers wrapping around hers with a warmth that made her feel safe, grounded. "So, let's start making plans," he said, his voice filled with determination. Let's figure out where we want to be, what kind of life we want to build together." Lauren smiled, a soft, knowing smile that made Evan's heart swell. "I'm ready," she said simply. And just like that, they began to talk about the future. They spoke about everything, about where they wanted to live, about the kind of life they wanted to lead, about the things they wanted to achieve together. They discussed traveling, starting a family, and how they wanted their careers to fit into this new life they were creating. It wasn't easy, of course. There were moments of uncertainty, moments when they didn't have all the answers, but the important thing was that they were in it together. For the first time in a long time, Evan wasn't focused on building an empire for himself. He was focused on building a life for them both. It was a shift he hadn't expected, but one that felt right. Over the next few months, their relationship continued to grow stronger, more defined. They moved forward with their plans, taking their time, enjoying the process of building something meaningful. They were no longer just two people living side by side. They were partners, truly and fully. But, as with any journey, there were still challenges ahead. There were moments of doubt, moments when the world seemed to close in on them, but they faced them together, with a strength that only came from the bond they had created. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of their apartment, watching the sun set over the city, Lauren looked at Evan, her heart full. "I'm glad we're doing this," she said quietly. "I'm glad we're finally building the life we've always wanted." Evan turned to her, his eyes soft, his expression full of affection. "Me too," he said. "And no matter what happens, we'll do it together." And in that moment, as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Evan and Lauren knew that their journey was just beginning. It wouldn't be without challenges, but they were ready to face them together, side by side. As time passed, Evan and Lauren's journey together only deepened. And with every new milestone they reached, their bond grew stronger. They had started to build the life they had dreamed of, but with that came new challenges, new decisions, and moments of vulnerability they had never expected. One evening, as they sat together on the couch in their cozy living room, their home now filled with the echoes of laughter, love, and warmth, Evan turned to Lauren, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he said quietly, his fingers absently tracing the edge of his coffee cup. Lauren, always attuned to his moods, looked up from the book she had been reading, her heart skipping a beat. She could tell that he was serious, that this conversation was important. "What about the future?" she asked, her voice gentle, her eyes meeting his. Evan hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "I think it's time we take the next big step," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. Lauren's heart raced at the thought of what he might be suggesting. They had already been through so much together, and everything was falling into place, but what could be the next step? "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Evan leaned forward, his eyes locked onto hers, and he spoke with a certainty that left no room for doubt. "I want us to make a commitment, Lauren, a real commitment. I want us to get married." Lauren felt a rush of emotion flood through her: surprise, joy, and a deep sense of love. She had never doubted her feelings for Evan, but hearing him say those words, the words that had been floating in the back of her mind for so long, made her feel like everything they had been working toward had led them to this very moment. "Evan, she began, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't need to say much. The look in her eyes, the way she held his hand, told him everything he needed to know. "I want that too," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I want to build our future together, and there's no one else I would want by my side." The words felt like a promise, a vow, and in that moment, Evan knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter. It was a chapter not just for them as individuals, but for them as a couple, one where they would face whatever challenges came their way, together. Over the next few weeks, they began to plan their wedding. It wasn't about extravagance or fulfilling family expectations. It was about them, about their love, about the life they had built together. They decided on a simple ceremony, one that reflected who they were: quiet, intimate, and full of meaning. It wasn't about the big, flashy event that Evan had once imagined. It was about the two of them, the promise they were making to one another. As they worked on the details, Lauren found herself reflecting on how far they had come. Just a year ago, she had been his secretary, quietly doing her job, living in the background of his life, and now, she was planning a future with him, one that was as equal and shared as it was built on love and trust. For Evan, the wedding wasn't just about celebrating their love. It was about showing the world that he was no longer the man he had been, the cold, calculating businessman. He was someone who was willing to be vulnerable, to give himself fully to another person, someone who had chosen love over legacy, passion over obligation. On their wedding day, as Lauren stood beside him, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, Evan couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She was everything he had ever wanted, and more, his equal, his partner, and now, his wife. When it came time to exchange vows, they stood in front of their closest friends and family, the people who had supported them through thick and thin. Evan spoke first, his voice steady, but full of emotion. "Lauren, when we first met, I never imagined that I would find someone like you. Someone who would see me, truly see me, beyond the suits and the empire. You've taught me what it means to live, to love, and to be vulnerable. You are my rock, my heart, and I promise to love you, honor you, and be there for you, no matter what the future holds." Lauren's heart swelled as she listened to him. She had always known how much he had changed, but hearing those words, hearing the depth of his commitment, made everything feel so real. She had always known that she would be with him, but now, it felt like the world was opening up before them. "Evan," she said softly, her voice full of love, "when I met you, I never thought I would find someone who would challenge me, support me, and love me as you do. You've made me see the best in myself, and you've made me want to be better. I promise to stand by you, to grow with you, and to build a future with you, together, every step of the way." The words came from her heart, as true and deep as they could be. As they exchanged rings, Evan and Lauren knew that this was just the beginning. The wedding was just one moment in a lifetime, of moments they would share together. As they kissed, the world around them seemed to fall away, leaving just the two of them, ready to face whatever the future held together. As the days and weeks went by, Evan and Lauren's life together continued to grow and evolve in ways they never expected. They had faced so many challenges, but through it all, they had learned how to lean on each other, support each other, and, most importantly, love each other in ways they had never imagined possible. Their marriage was more than just a commitment. It was a partnership, a bond built on trust, respect, and shared dreams. They had started from a place of uncertainty, from a place of figuring things out, but now they were standing firm in the life they had built together. A life full of love, laughter, and possibility. One afternoon, as they sat in their favorite cafe, enjoying a quiet moment together, Evan looked at Lauren, his eyes full of affection. "You know," he said, his voice gentle, "I never thought I could be this happy." Lauren smiled, her heart swelling at his words. "Why do you say that?" she asked, curious. Evan took a deep breath, as if choosing his words carefully. "I've spent so much of my life chasing after things that I thought would bring me happiness, money, status, power. But I've realized now that none of that matters without you. Without us. What we have together is everything. I never expected this, but I wouldn't change it for the world." Lauren reached across the table, taking his hand in hers, her fingers gently tracing the lines of his palm. "Evan," she said softly, "I feel the same way. When I first started working with you, I never imagined this. I never imagined us, or this life. But now, it feels like everything I ever wanted. You've made me feel like I'm truly seen, like I'm truly loved, and that means everything to me." Evan squeezed her hand, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I don't think we ever expected to be where we are today, but I'm glad we are. I'm glad we have each other." The world outside the cafe seemed to fade away as they sat there together, lost in the quiet comfort of each other's presence. It was moments like these that reminded them of how far they had come, and how much more they still had to look forward to. As the weeks turned into months, they continued to build their life side by side, facing each new challenge with the same strength and determination that had carried them this far. They traveled together, explored new cities, and spent long evenings talking about everything and anything. They found joy in the little things, the quiet mornings with coffee, the shared looks of understanding, the way they could be themselves with each other without fear or pretense. Their love was no longer just about the big gestures, the grand promises. It was in the small, everyday moments that made up their life together. And as time went on, Evan and Lauren realized that the greatest gift they had given each other was the freedom to be their true selves, without the pressure to be anything other than who they were. The life they had built wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. And that was enough. One evening, after a long day of work, as they sat on the couch in their living room, Lauren turned to Evan, her eyes shining. "Evan," she said, her voice filled with a quiet excitement, "I've been thinking. I think it's time for us to take the next step." Evan looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Lauren smiled, her heart full of anticipation. "I think it's time we start talking about expanding our family. I've always known I wanted to have children someday, and I think I'm ready to take that step with you." Evan's heart skipped a beat as he processed her words. He had always known this moment would come, but hearing it from Lauren, hearing her say that she wanted to build a family with him, made everything feel real in a new way. "I think I'm ready for that too," he said, his voice filled with warmth and love. "I've always known that we would build a family together, but now I can't wait to start that next chapter with you." They sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of their decision settling over them. But it wasn't an overwhelming feeling, it was a peaceful one. They had come so far together, and now they were ready to take the next step. They knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges ahead, but they also knew that together they could face anything. And as the days passed, they began to make plans, to dream about the future they would build, and to imagine the life that lay ahead for them. Their love had already carried them through so much, and now it would carry them into the next chapter of their journey, one that was full of promise, full of hope, and full of love. And as Evan and Lauren looked to the future, they knew that whatever came their way, they would face it hand in hand, ready to embrace whatever life had in store for them. The future was theirs to create, and they were ready to begin the rest of their lives together. Discover the captivating journey of two people from different walks of life who found love in the most unexpected way. This touching story of a billionaire and his secretary explores the transformation of a relationship built on trust, vulnerability, and real connection, making it one of the most heartwarming millionaire stories you'll ever hear. From a chance encounter that began with a wedding gone wrong, to the realization that true happiness is found in love, not wealth, this millionaire story is filled with emotional growth, struggles, and triumphs. Witness the evolution of Evan, a billionaire who had spent years prioritizing success over personal connection, and Lauren, his ever-reliable secretary who learns to embrace her own desires and dreams. Their journey together shows that sometimes the most unlikely relationships lead to the most fulfilling lives. Through ups and downs, they take on the world together, proving that no matter your status, love is the most valuable thing to hold on to. Join them in their heartwarming millionaire story as they break free from their past, rediscover themselves, and build a future filled with meaning and mutual respect. This story is a true testament to how love transcends wealth, and how two people can change their lives by simply choosing each other. If you're a fan of inspiring millionaire stories, this narrative will leave you believing that anything is possible when you have the right person by your side. From awkward beginnings to deep emotional connection, their love story is one for the books, and this millionaire story reminds us all that the richest people are not those with the most money, but those with the most love to give. So, if you're looking for a powerful tale of transformation, love, and success, these millionaire stories are sure to touch your heart and leave you inspired.